Hey, how y'all doing? Hey, welcome to Grow Night, Winter Grow Night. Welcome to all of you who are watching online on Facebook. We're so glad to have you this evening. This is our second to last Grow Night. We have David with us this evening to talk about worship. Yes, to talk about worship and music, maybe. Worship. So I just have a couple of announcements just to remind you that next Wednesday at 4:45, we're going to have the Reverend Alex Shanks here to talk about the Florida Conference and the United Methodist Church and General Conference. So we hope that you plan on coming or watching online. Also, if you have questions for David while he's doing his presentation, just to make sure you hold those to the end. Those of you who are watching on Facebook, you can go ahead and type your questions in, but just know that we will wait until the end to answer your questions, but you can go ahead and type them in any time that you want. So we're going to pray and then go ahead and get started. So gracious God, we just thank you so much for this evening and for this opportunity for us to gather together both in person and online on this beautiful Wednesday evening. We ask that this will be a time when we can learn and grow. We pray all of this in your name. Amen. All right, David.
You'd think a worship leader would learn to turn their mic on first before starting to try and speak. So hello, it's so wonderful to be back at Grow Nights. Last year I did a presentation and it ended up going rather well. It was a fun time for me to kind of go into the process of how I choose worship music that we do. And once again, I mean, I know that my context personally leads more into modern worship. And so while I have experience and knowledge about traditional worship as well, I always learned, with my background in teaching, you teach from your expertise and your experience. And so, tonight, again, I will be sort of giving some context to some modern worship that we do here. But I also ran into a dilemma because last time I sort of went through a whole slew of topics, and I went very, very quickly, and I gave you a lot of jargon, and I talked, theology and music theory and just all of these words that, may or may not mean anything to people if they're not experts in those fields or have some knowledge of those fields. And so each one of those within their own context really could have been a 40-minute discussion, and so I tried to cram a lot into that time. And I remember getting the 5-minute warning, and then I still had 2 points and a 6-minute song to try to share. So this time I tried to really narrow it into just one category, and tonight try to make it more conversational, less jargon, more discussion about what worship music is. And specifically tonight, what I decided to speak on was a defense of worship, of modern worship. A defense of modern worship. And the reason I say it like that is that I, growing up in various churches, especially when there are certain generational differences in taste and music and in tradition, there are a lot of people that give reasons why they think modern worship isn't good. Isn't why the music sucks, or all this kind of stuff. And so I wanted tonight to go through kind of a list of those critiques that I've heard in the past and see if I can reframe some of those critiques to allow for a more open understanding of what worship can be, and specifically in the context of music, perhaps how to listen or how to engage with modern worship. And so, let's get right into it. The first thing that I always try to open up with, and I opened up with this point last year as well. Music is subjective. And no matter how much learning you have about music, it is still subjective. So I have a degree in music. I've studied it. I've engaged with it. I've done concerts, and and I've been very lucky enough to have done a very diverse set of music. I sang on stage with the Royal Philharmonic for Star Wars in concert, and then I went and did musicals, and then so I've done classical and I've done modern, and it. So within that entire context of experience that I've had, it's all subjective as to whether the things that I've done are good or bad when it comes to taste in music. And so even with all of that learning that I've done. So better example is, and this is the example I always give, is when I was teaching, okay, I had a lot of students that, being from Florida and growing up in Florida, they listened to a lot of country music. Country music is not my thing. Not a fan. I don't like the sound of it, don't like the lyrics, I can't engage with it. It does not grab me in the same way that it grabs some of these students. And so when I was younger, especially when I was younger growing up in the Midwest, I would rail against country music. I would, say that it's ridiculous. All the jokes about if you played it backwards, you'd get your dog back and your wife back and your horse back and, everything would. And so, all those jokes that we make about a genre of music that we don't understand. And so what I've discovered in my teaching career and then in my own personal journey through music is that even when I'm teaching about music, I don't have the ability to tell someone whether that music is good or bad. Now, I have a more educated conversation about it. Like within a genre that I know well, within a genre that I've studied, I can give points as to whether or not something is considered good music or bad music. But guess what? Even if I consider something to be bad music, there's still someone out there that enjoys it. And so I can't in good conscience, okay, so if I'm having a very intellectual discussion about it, sure, I can give you all the reasons why I'm not a fan of Richard Wagner. There's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't be fans of Wagner. However, he is very important to music history. He's got all these things. And so whether I like it or not is irrelevant. Somebody likes it. And so especially where country music was concerned for me, I learned very early that when I went against or spoke out against a genre of music that one of my students really enjoyed, it deflated them. Music is so personal to us. It's something that we've had history with it, that it's something we've grown up with, or it's something that we've engaged with, that we've done music, we've played instruments, we have gone to concerts, and so we have these experiences that sort of dictate our feelings about music. And so those they're not a passive part of us. They are a very active part of us. They invoke emotion. They invoke a physical response at times. And so it's very difficult when you're talking about music to really have an objective opinion, because objective opinions don't exist. You can have an opinion, you can have an educated opinion, but you cannot have an objective opinion. That's a little bit of just my personal music philosophy. Like, especially when I was teaching, that was what I tried to teach my students, is that music can neither be good nor bad. You can like it or you don't like it, and that's okay. Another thing, I when I was in school, I hated 12-tone atonal music. Couldn't stand it. I thought it was stupid. I thought they just threw notes on a page and and anybody can do it, right? It's like modern art. It's like someone, I could splatter paint against a canvas, but you didn't. And so as I started to learn and as I started to listen and as I started to engage and further my education within a genre of music, I learned that I actually really kind of enjoyed it, that there were composers that were in this genre that I listened to on purpose. It wasn't just an educational response, but I actually wanted more of what they had to offer in a genre of music that I originally had no desire to listen to. So that's always where I want to start. I always want to start with this understanding that your opinion of music is always valid to you, and that's good. Your opinion, as it pertains to somebody else, less important. You can have very intelligent discussions about music, and you can talk and rail with your friends about, how dare you like whoever artist that you don't like. And it's very fun, very interesting. But for the sake of intellectual discussion about music, it's all subjective. And so that's where I want to start with us as far as philosophy of music goes before we get into this. Going back to modern worship, there are some who simply don't like the sound of modern worship. They don't like the drums, they don't like the guitars, they don't like the synth lines. And so there's actually something about the music itself that maybe you don't enjoy. And so first off, I want to say that's okay. That's okay that you do not enjoy it. That's okay that there are sounds that don't really speak to you in a visceral way that they would speak to in other people. Me personally, not a fan of the organ. I don't like the timbre. I don't like how it sounds. I think that it's screechy and loud and ridiculous. However, I know that people really feel when an organ is present in worship. There's something about the way that they have those huge pipes that resonate within the building, and that there is something about the experience of having an organ in worship that really speaks to you. Me doesn't speak to me the same way. Especially the really screechy ones that with the pipes about that big. Like, there's something, it just doesn't really gel with my ears. So we get that same way. There's something about the timbre, and that's okay. That's okay. So we know music is subjective. Going into the actual substance of modern worship, one of the things that I get a lot, and this is a lyrical critique, is that it's too repetitive. There's a lot of conversation about, where they just say what do they call it, 7-Eleven songs or whatever. There was a joke about that for a while, that you say 7 words 11 times. It's like, you just keep repeating the word, keep repeating the word, keep repeating the words. And that sort of takes people out of the context of worship. They're like, why am I saying the same thing again? I got it the first time. So here's where I want to reframe this for you. Within the biblical context, repetition is important. There's a reason that in Revelation they say holy 3 times. There's something significant about the repetition of phrases scripturally that drives truth further every time that it's said. And so the way that I think about this is, when something is repeated, and if it is truth that is repeated, is it any less true the 5th time you heard it than the first time? So again, like, you might think, okay, so it's superfluous. Why am I saying the same thing? I got it, like, I understand it. And this is something that might seem, and I'm just going to be careful with it, because I don't want you to think that this is where the influence is coming from. I just want to give you an example outside of the church where this happens. So in a lot of Eastern traditions, right, there's something called mantra. If you have heard anyone that chants or does that, and this is also true within the church, we have context of that within Gregorian practices and things, where they will repeat something to themselves over and over again. And the spiritual practice that is exemplified there is that the more you say it, the more it becomes ingrained in you. I mean, if we only had to hear something once, and if we read the Bible through, start to finish, why would we ever pick it up again? I mean, do you think that I would hope that your pastors don't do this, but if they're preparing a sermon for Sunday, you'd hope that they would read that passage over and over and over again so that they would get as much from it as possible. Something might hit you the 3rd time that didn't hit you the first time. And the thing is, we're talking about simple phrases, but true phrases. So I want to give you an example of this. And the way that I also want to frame this example before we get into it, it is the same lyrical text about 8 times. But it's also framed in a different way. Because when you're talking mantra or when you're talking about just a phrase, okay, you're saying it. There's no real build, there's no real, unless you're doing it yourself. But with music, we have another element that we can bring in. With music, we have dynamics, and we have instrumentation, and we have timbre, and we have all of these things that start to grow that idea from something that can be simply stated. But with music, we have other ways that that phrase can grow and develop. And then by the time you've heard it the 5th time, as that music swells and as those drums come in and as those other things, that there is something that, and this is speaking from my experience going to worship nights and going to these concerts, there is something different about when that music reaches its climax. So I want to go ahead and play this for you. And again, you might get to the point about the 4th time through it, you're just like, oh, okay, like I get it. I get what they've said. Thank you very much. However, I want you to let it keep going. I want you to pay attention to how the music behind it is driving the truths that are stated in the words, in the lyrics, to bring something new out of it. Here we go. So this is... and both of the examples that I'm going to show tonight are from Hillsong, but this one is it's a praise chorus that is called The Same Power. So here we go.
Same power that conquered the grave lives in me, lives in me. And your love that rescued the earth lives in me.
I'm going to stop it for a split second just so I can relay those lyrics to you real quick so that you know them moving forward. So this praise chorus, the lyrics are, the same power that conquered the grave lives in me, lives in me. Your love that rescued the earth lives in me, lives in me. And so I just wanted to make sure we understand what these truths are before we continue. Here we go.
Same power. Same power, conquered the grave, lives in me.
So you can see it didn't stay the same. Or at least I hope you experienced that. I know oops, my watch is talking to me. But I hope you could feel that change. That once those drums came in, and once it started building, and once it arrived at that climax, there was something different about that time versus the first time that we said it. And so it's not that the truth is any less truth. It's that the music itself helped us to drive that point home. So that's something I've always misunderstood, or I never understood about the question of repetition. I've never understood that because I always felt like in these worship experiences, and once again, this is what I grew up in. This is my context of worship when I was a kid, and this is what I understand. But by the time we got to that, I was ready to sing it again. I mean, I remember going to concerts where, and I will show you another song in a bit that also has some repetition in it. But that's for a different point. But that song on the album goes for 10 minutes. It goes for 10 minutes. And the thing is that it recycles this idea of growth and then arrival and then decay and then growth and arrival and decay. And and this will get to another point, is that there's some sort of emotional context that is happening in the music that you are arriving at that truth differently than you started with. So I want to go ahead and move on to the next thing, but that's too much repetition. I want to challenge you. Yes, it's repeating for a reason. See if it means something differently, if you're paying attention to it through that fifth or sixth time. Some of these kind of go together. So a thing that I've heard a lot is that modern worship is too shallow, that the lyrics are very shallow, that they don't reach the kind of depth. Or that they're lyrically, there's a lot of, that it's all about me. That, there's a lot of self-reflection within modern worship. And the truth is that is a very, I would say, accurate critique. There's a reason that I don't choose a lot of worship songs that are out there. But I'll tell you, there's also a reason that I don't choose every hymn that's out there to do on a Sunday morning either. So if you're looking for music that is about you, sometimes contextually that's needed. For example, this entire worship series that we've been through is all about looking inside and saying, okay, what do I need to work on? What are my hurts? What are my habits? What are my hang-ups? And so for a message series such as this, I'm looking for those songs that say, okay, look, like I need to go inward. I need to be introspective. I need to say, how is God going to help me get through this? And the entire point is that we don't stay there. There's a context for everything. There is a time for those kinds of songs. There is a time for when we declare that Jesus is King, coming up for Transfiguration Sunday. There's a time that we discuss the Spirit with Pentecost and all that. Like, we have these seasons that we choose songs that go along with that. And so to be an overarching critique of modern worship, I think is just, maybe you haven't been paying attention to the other songs. So one of the songs that I'll tell you that I have a big critique about, okay? I cannot stand Good Father. And the thing is that it's been one that's been in just about every other church that I've went to and gone to, and I don't know if everyone knows that song, but the very last time you sing through the chorus, okay, so the chorus is, you're a good father, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you, it's who I am, and that's it. And so, like, it ends with, like, the reason you are a good father is it's who I am. I never understood contextually how that's important. I've never understood how that is the final idea that we are left with in that song. And so, yes, like, there are valid critiques about where the lyrics are heading, but that is not true of all of worship music. There's just as much music that is all about the Trinity. We're singing a song coming up on Transfiguration Sunday that is called King of Kings, that really goes through the entire story of the church. And the chorus is basically the doxology. Praise the, I'm going to lose it right now. Sure, yep, all of those. Praise all the triune God. Yes, indeed. But it goes through, and it's all about praising the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. And the verses are the story of the church. There's not a whole lot of me that's in that. We're speaking history, and we're speaking, to truths of how the church came to be and what that means for us, not us personally, but us as a congregation or us as a global church. And then once again, the chorus brings us back to that moment of we are here to worship the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So I've never understood that if all you're hearing is me, I, listen to some new music. There's so much out there. There's too much, in my opinion. I can't even listen to it all. Every church has its own even culture of worship, and they're all bringing out these albums for everybody to listen to, even though that album is specifically what's happening in worship at their church. So the shallowness and the all about me and those kinds of lyrics where we're only kind of getting right here, I just don't see that if you're really looking. One example I will give too is my favorite worship song, and I shared this worship song last year, and so it's called 100 Billion Times, or So Will I is the name of the worship song. And it has some of the most, if you're looking for depth in a worship song, and I'll go ahead and just read you some of the lyrics real quick, because, it says things that other songs don't say. And if you're looking for depth, in the end, depth is what you make of it. Because if you're looking for depth, tell me how Amazing Grace is a deep song. Amazing Grace is a very simple song. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost and now I'm found, was blind but now I see. Why does that song have so much weight for each one of us? Because it's so universal in its ability to render people into a state of worship. But it's so simple. It's not deep. Now, granted, the implications behind what it's saying, we can get deep with that. But the song itself is just here it is. I was lost, now I'm found. This is salvation. Amazing grace. So depth is what you make of it. Once again, I'm gonna go ahead and read some of these lyrics for you, just so we can talk about what I believe to be more theopoetics, and that's a word that is bounced around in a realm of theology called process thought. But in theopoetics, it's this conversation of that theology is poetry, that there is something about the interpretation that matters, and how it affects you individually that matters. And so let's go ahead and I just want to read this first verse in chorus, because, again, this just speaks. God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time, with no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of light. Okay, who talks like that? You spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of light. There's actual action of creation that is being said in a way that most other people wouldn't say it. That's, to me, very deep. So, and as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've made, every burning star a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. How beautiful is that? Because it paints this picture of space in such a way that makes God this artist of creation, and that every moment is this. And what I love about this too is that it's very Wesleyan. It's very prevenient grace. It's like, that these stars that have been, around for billions of years, that each one of them has the fingerprint of the Father in it. And that's beautiful, and we find depth there. So again, if you're losing depth in the breadth of modern worship, I'd say keep looking. It's there, you know. And that was and also it's not me lyrics. It's all about the majesty of God, of our Creator. All right, moving on. Okay, so this is another one that I get a lot, and then it's all about the concert. It's all about the show. And I always try to point to, there's a very applicable Bible story that talks to this, right? It talks about the Pharisee who is in the temple, and he's making grandiose prayers and making sure that everybody can see him, saying, that he's offering up these, glories and these invocations, and he's doing it in flowery language. And what does Jesus do? He says, don't be like that guy. He's doing it for the show. And so that Pharisee was just praying, and he's doing it for the show. My point here is intention matters. Any act of worship, prayer, greeting, it can all be for the show. Where your heart is in worship matters. And so, I'll tell you, as a musician, okay, I have been in concerts my whole life. It's just something I do. And yes, there is a performance element to every one of them. However, there's also times where when I am playing or when I'm singing, I'm just lost in using my gift as an act of worship. Now, granted, being a singer, there's a very obvious, most people recognize singing as an act of worship. But what about Rick over here playing the piano? What about every single time that he is giving us those, it is background music to the prayer, or it's background music to the communion, but is that not also an act of worship by simply playing the piano? If you watch guitar players or drummers, okay, sometimes I've seen worship drummers get so into it, and they are worshiping, and they are slamming those drums, and they are just going insane. But all of that energy and all of that emotion and all of that is going to God. They're not doing it because the dude in the back's like, yeah, twirl your sticks. It's not a rock concert to him. He's doing it as an act of worship because that is what he has been called to do. And so my question here is always, who made you the gatekeeper to say that what they are doing is not an act of worship? Where is it written that you are allowed to even say, I'm sorry, no, I perceive that as performance, and so therefore what you're doing isn't worship? I don't know of anything that can be more conceited. If I am thinking that I have that right or that ability to differentiate even what is an act of performance and what is an act of worship when it comes to someone else's walk, when it comes to someone else's gifting. Now, what I would suggest is we need to look at ourselves. We need to say, okay, look, I know I'm not a musician. I don't, whatever area that I'm in, am I doing it for the show or am I doing it for God? And in the end, in a very obvious allegory to Plank and Splinter, make sure that you are not judging someone else's expression of worship based on your assumptions of where their heart is. So I always feel very, very passionate about that because it's the same thing. Growing up in churches where women were not allowed to be in leadership, right? And then, of course, I turned out to be a raging feminist. But I never understood why women couldn't be in leadership. Just speaking of all the women that I've been under and all of the teachers that I've had and all of the, sermons that I've listened to from women preachers, and I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand how someone can think otherwise. And so we have Pastor Christine right here, right? So, one of the things I've never understood is, for those who say that Pastor Christine's call is not valid, how can you from outside say that, I'm sorry, God, like she heard the call and she answered the call from a higher power than you? So I've never understood how anyone can think that they have the right to say, I'm sorry, your call is not genuine. Like, that's wild to me. And so the entire concept of performance or performative worship, it's all about intention. It's all about following call. And I don't think that's anything that you can look at and judge. Not unless you know them. Not unless you know them. So, okay. So we're going to move on from that. But that's when I get really passionate about it. Like, be cautious, because you don't know where their heart is, and, you might hear them wailing on that guitar, and you might think, oh, look at them, they're playing a rock concert. No, they're playing for Jesus. Cool. They're just passionate about it. Amen to that. All right, so I want to say, I'm trying to think if there's anything else on this list. The last thing that I wanted to discuss too, and this kind of goes into all of it. This sort of is a culmination. And forgive me, I did not actually go through and find the moment in the song that this starts, so I'm going to have to sort of do some scrubbing. But there is a song that is called "With Everything," and once again, it's from the same band. It's from Hillsong United, and there's a moment where they have the entire congregation. All they're saying is "Whoa." There are no lyrics. There are no, there's nothing that is being given for you to latch onto or for you to ruminate in. It is a moment where the congregation is simply lifting up a shout of praise. And it's repetitious. And it builds. And I always, one of my college pastors, when we were talking about this, it was very, very big in modern worship, to have a section like this, back when, I guess this was like 2007 to like 2010, back when I was, first in college. And when we had discussed about why these things exist, my college pastor talked to me, it's like, because worship is universal. And worship breaks the barrier of language. And the thing is, if we are truly a global church, if we are truly a church that represents more than just white America, I mean, let's be real, we need to have an understanding that our context of worship is not the only context out there. And that having a moment that is absent language all of a sudden opens the door that everyone can walk through and worship together. All right, so I just want to give you that as a way to frame this moment, that as we are listening to this, and again, this is otherwise an 8-minute song. I want to just go ahead and see where I can find it, where the moment happens. So you'll have to forgive me. I'm going to have to scrub here a little bit. So let this music, this bridge, wash over you.
With
So, one thing that I love about this song is that it just completely renders you further in every time that they say it, every time they do it. And let me tell you, when I went to see these guys, and like I said, they've done this song. This song kind of really carried them for a while. And when I went to go see them for a worship experience, you're looking at an entire stadium, and all of us just that, whoa, and you're talking, 20,000 people, all just lifting up that shout to God, without the barrier of language, without even the necessity for instrumentation. Because you heard kind of as that was leaving, the piano continued, but then the congregation lifted it up again. And so it's personal to me because I have had these experiences. It's personal to me because modern worship is what I grew up in. And I've always felt that critiques or the conversations, if we simply took a step back and understood the context of our own ideas of what good music is, and we kind of step beyond that, we understood the context of why these things change and what this new modern worship exists as, that we can continue to sing a new song. The God is the God of new things. And the God is inspiring worship artists. The God is inspiring these musicians to write and to play and to make music for His glory. So I just want to say thank you guys for having me. I think we can go ahead and go. I don't know how much time we have left. I've spoken for 45 minutes, go figure.
So we do have some questions.
Go for it. Okay.
So online, people have talked about that they like to download the music that we play on Sunday.
Oh.
And a lot of people know that we do a lot of Hillsong music, but they're asking what other bands music do we often play?
Sure, okay. So, we do a lot of Hillsong simply because Hillsong, to me, has, of all the modern churches, they've got the best vetting process for their songs. They actually really pay attention to theological context and things, so that's why we end up doing a lot of Hillsong, is that I actually really appreciate their process. We do some elevation worship, so Elevation Church, and then some, I guess we don't really do very much of them. Passion is another one that we used to get some from, but not so much anymore. Trying to think who else we grab from. River Valley Church is one that the Hope Has a Name, the one we just did this past weekend. They've been doing a lot of good stuff. Vertical Church has some good ones. I don't think we've done anything from them yet. And then, some of the solo artists. So I know that, I'm going to lose her name right now. Meredith. She's the one that does the oh no, she's at the water song. It's awful. Okay. So some of the solo artists as well, and some of them have songs on the radio, others don't. Yeah. And I know that we used to put it up on.
We used to. We haven't done it.
We haven't done that in a while.
Over a year.
Yeah. So
we used to do a set list, but we haven't done it.
Yeah, we used to put the songs in a post on our Facebook wall and our Instagram and all that kind of stuff. So maybe that's something we can start doing again. And we provided the artists for who those were coming from. So and the churches that those were coming from. So maybe we can start doing that again if that's an interest.
Hey, David, I have a comment
Sure.
and then a question that's not very good, but but my comment might be better.
There's no such thing as bad questions.
The two of us sitting here are gatekeepers. We came from, really kind of more non-traditional progressive seeker churches with the smoke and the guitars and everything like that. And I can remember being in those types of services. They were very entertaining. But a lot of times it felt as though the singers were singing over the crowd. I would look around the crowd, and the crowd would not be engaged because it would get so loud, it would get so intense, that at some point it became a concert rather than a worship service. But you made an interesting point tonight that I think really opened my eyes and changed it for me. You said it changes when you know the singer, and you know the singer's heart. I don't know your heart as well as I know you. I know the Red Wings and Waterford Kettering and everything like that. But David, I know you, and so when I hear you sing, I don't discount for a moment what you bring to the stage, what you bring to the game, and what you bring to the passion of worship. Knowing you as a person really, to me, supersedes what you do on stage. You do an excellent job here at church.
Well, thank you.
Okay, my question.
Sure. Yes.
You had mentioned organ music, and I'm probably on the same page. When I hear organ music, it reminds me of maybe a baseball game, seventh inning, different things like that. That's when I hear an organ. That's what I grew up with. But it made me think, when I don't know what the break is necessarily between traditional music and contemporary music, because if we think about it, probably the first time that an organ was at a church, there's a chance that was considered contemporary music at one point. And I'm wondering what your feelings are. What defines it? When did music become contemporary? Because at one point, any instrumentation on a Sunday morning was considered a contemporary service.
And that is a very good point. So, I mean, the way that I always talk about this is that everyone's tradition is what they grew up in. So, like, you know, when you talk tradition, I mean, are you talking Catholic tradition? Are you talking Episcopalian? Are you talking Baptist? Are you talking, it's like each of us sort of have a concept of what that is. And then within the Methodist Church, we have the Book of Worship, and we have, you know, the Methodist hymnal and things. So the Methodist conversation of what traditional looks like, but even within that, it's a very broad understanding. So, because the Methodist Church has you have a lot of wiggle room for what you want to do. So I don't know if that's answerable as far as like what traditional means versus what contemporary means. I will tell you this though. So the basic understanding of what people think of as traditional is what would be hymns. I mean, that's, you know, so within the context of how we classify our services, it's the predominant use of hymns for worship. And then, you know, we'll sometimes when there's a special music or if there's a response to the usually we have a song that is the response to the sermon. And so that's usually a modern song. And then we sort of went into this contemporary worship that happened in the 90s and early thousands. And then that shifted again. And once again, it's like music genres. How do you know that the 80s are different from the 70s? You know, there's a specific sound that the 80s have. There's a specific, you know, way of doing music that you can recognize. And so there was sort of that shift in contemporary music, a move more towards electronic sounds and the influx of those, and a lot of these really sweeping crescendos and these long, you know, sections of bridge and instrumentals and things like that. So there sort of became this new idea of what worship could sound like. Really, with Hillsong kind of taking the lead on defining that. Darlene Check came on the picture, and she was sort of the end of the contemporary era. And then as that church, you know, shout to the Lord, all the earth, let us sing. I mean, that came out, late 90s, 2000. I don't even know. It's, yeah, that's Hillsong's been around for a long time, and they've been influencing worship music for a long time. But that was sort of the end of the contemporary period, and then now we're in the modern period, and so we actually have a distinction for what that means. And then just kind of a side point, organ is actually one of the oldest instruments we have. They had organs even back in the ancient days, you know, that because it was a bellows and it came through the thing. And so organs are actually not as organs have been around for a very, very long time. So, anyway.
Any other questions?
Okay.
David, you have lots and lots of positive affirmations.
Oh, thank you.
On Facebook that you're going to have to read. Lots of people
Well, thank you very
saying
much.
fabulous things. So not a lot of questions, but lots and lots and lots of positive reinforcement.
Well, thank you very much.
So there's lots of love online, so make sure you check out Facebook. Thank you, everyone, for coming out, and thank you, all you guys on Facebook, for tuning in and being so active, very active in the chat. Hey, Liz Schweers wants to know, are we totally abandoning contemporary style? So we're more modern.
Yes. So I mean, when I talk about what we do, we are modern worship.
Yeah,
What we do on a Sunday is modern worship. Because I will call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised. We're not doing that stuff anymore. So that's geez. There was like a whole slew of all those like Christian campfire songs that we used to do. We're not doing those anymore.
Did you do that? Did you ever?
Oh, are you kidding me? Yeah. There was an entire medley that you could go through, about 7 of them, and they all had the same chord progression. It was great.
All right. So anyways, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight and for tuning in on Facebook. We've enjoyed your talk, David. You always bring such a new understanding to worship and to music and how we understand it. Thank you again so much, and thank you all, everybody, for coming out. Let's pray. Gracious God, again, we thank you so much for this beautiful day and this chance for us to gather together, both online and in person. And we do praise you for David and his wonderful ministry and how he helps us all the time to be praising and worshiping you in such new and exciting ways. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, you guys, have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.